So we have about 35 minutes today. We're going to go through Hadoop, now, next, and beyond. The way I thought about this in preparing to explain to you guys what we're up to at Hortonworks is Hadoop now is basically what are we shipping, what are people doing with Hadoop, and what is Hortonworks adding on top of it. Next is basically Hadoop.2. We'll talk about what's coming down the pike in Hadoop and what's the status of it all. And beyond is sort of how enterprises and you guys as representatives of those enterprises should start thinking about Hadoop as part of your long-term data management ecosystem and solutions. Before I get into it, I guess I wanted to ask how many people here, show of hands, are running a Hadoop production cluster? So quite a few of you. How many people are experimenting with Hadoop right now? So between those two sets of hands, we're talking about 70%, 65% of the room. So you guys probably get Hadoop better than the average noob, if you will. And that makes sense because you're a Lucene user community. So some of what I'm going to do is basically predicated on the assumption that you knew what I'm going to talk to you about, which means I'm not going to talk about, as Grant said, you know, every talk about big data first defines big data and then says 3 V's, volume, velocity, variety, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. We're not going to do that. We're going to talk about Hadoop itself and where it's going. So even though I claim that, let's first make sure we all know what Hadoop is for the other 40% in the room. Basically, there are market drivers, the way we look at it as Hortonworks, the way you look at it as consumers of technology and as people who solve problems for business. There are market drivers pushing you towards new data management solutions. And those drivers could be anything from the line of business coming to you and saying, hey, can we build a system that serves this business need? Or the line of business coming to you and saying, can I answer this question about my usage patterns? One of my favorite examples back when I was chief architect at Walmart.com was basketballs. Basketballs were in the sporting goods department and in the toys department. Which one sold better and why? Which meant a very robust search and analytics capability. And all of the click trail data was in this third-party product locked away. So we put all the click trail data into a relational store inside traditional Oracle, believe it or not, 1 billion inserts a day back in 2001. And it worked because we turned off all audit trails in Oracle, all safety of the data. And then people could express relational queries on that data. And what did I find? There was not a single business person who could figure out how to join the table onto itself to come up with how do I figure, and it was partitioned on day, how do I figure out what's actually the right query to run that'll return in a couple of minutes out of Oracle instead of a couple of weeks out of Oracle for the same question. So the business basically spent the last decade trying to avoid asking us questions of their data. And now they're saying, well, I need those questions answered because, as Grant said, there's an opportunity to improve supply chain efficiencies, improve usability of products, and everyone's figured that out. So we're collecting more data. We're talking to our customers through Twitter, through Facebook. We are social as businesses. All of this is causing an explosion of data. It's coming from everywhere in every format. And what's interesting is IT is exploding with the data volumes, right? So we're literally trying to buy enough equipment to store all the data, and we're trying to buy that equipment from, and I don't mean to malign any vendors here, but from the network appliances of the world and the EMCs of the world because of the hammer-nail problem, right? Sometimes I think about IT design as the notion being we have pillars of design. Operationally, we build systems expertise, and then app guys come in, people in the room here come in and try to build systems that fit on top of those pillars. And sometimes they need the pillars to move, change, because they're They want to, developers want a door somewhere that a door can't be made because of how the foundations have been set up. But our foundations today in ops are things like NFS and storage area networks, load balancers, HTTP, stateless load balancers, things like that. Cloud is starting to become a pillar of IT. Relational databases, flat file storage, and do we really have a lot of ops guys saying, ooh, let's do clustered file systems on commodity storage? We're just getting there, right? Yet the volume of data is screaming into the business through the systems. So IT itself can say we've got to innovate. If you're a Twitter or a Facebook, you did this 5 years ago. You said, I can't afford to put everything in a relational store from a latency perspective and from a cost perspective. But the rest of us see that opportunity now too. And so you end up with these market drivers leading you to want to innovate on how you store and manage your data because you want to answer questions you used to put off and you want to lower cost of ownership and things like that. So what are those next generation solutions? There's a bunch of them, right? There's NoSQL solutions. There's people telling you, I've got a better database. There are people telling you the database is dead, long live the database. It's the wrong API, et cetera. So there's Apache Hadoop, which again, most of you know. It's an open source collection of a bunch of things. Grant rattled off things like Pig, Hive, HBase, Zookeeper. Those are pieces of Hadoop. Right? I was at a bank yesterday in Connecticut, and the champion of Hadoop in the account was very embarrassed, red-faced, because before I explained what our products do and what the value of this solution space is, he got up and did his song and dance. And the first thing he did is said, guys, we're going to do everything based on HBase, because HBase is the SQL interface to Hadoop. And I had to get up there and in my discussion say, actually it's Hive that's HiveQL and looks like SQL and can be treated as an analog to traditional databases. And HBase is a key value store that is more like a NoSQL solution. But by the way, I can never keep straight what these things are. So Hadoop is this big set of projects in Apache. And somehow we make sense of it. We as Hortonworks strive to make sense of it for you as Hadoop users, but you as Hadoop users actually end up needing to make sense of it. There's Mahout, there's Oozie, there's Scoop and Flume, there's Hive, Pig, HBase, Zookeeper, name nodes, job trackers, all of it in the core, etc. And what's interesting about it is, why is it broken up in these ways? It kind of comes back to the Solr and the Nutch underpinnings, where it started out at Google as the Google file system, turned into open source Hadoop with the Hadoop file system, and the core realization that Hadoop developers, Hadoop creators came up with is that you got to have the data on disk, the data's got to be safe, and the data's got to be spread out across a bunch of share-nothing machines. That is HDFS at the core. Now, on top of that, you need services to get to that data the way it's spread out or sharded or partitioned across all those share-nothing machines. So then all the APIs and interfaces and layers get built on top of it. And then, in the bottom right, what you see is on these core technologies, Zookeeper, HDFS, and MapReduce, you have companies starting to emerge. Some guys will build you a product and they say, Hadoop has great interfaces, but the implementation sucks. So I'm going to build a proprietary Hadoop implementation. Other guys say, Hadoop works great, but the file system can be tuned. It keeps 3 copies of all data on 3 different nodes so that I don't lose any data. Why not just keep 2 like regular RAID systems do? So someone will give you a tuned version of HDFS. Someone else will build a company around this, that, or the other thing. What's cool about the Lucene and Hadoop partnership, or Hortonworks partnership between Lucid and Hortonworks, what's cool about us is we're actually complementing each other very well. Mahout comes to our community through Grant and Lucid, and it's very Hadoop friendly. It's HDFS aware. It does its learning and its statistics gathering and its clustering analysis against data in HDFS. So you can be a Lucene user, get all the power of search the way Lucene makes it run so fast, and then you can get some of that search to start indexing and working against your data in a clustered file system in HDFS. That's a great value added. Like, we wouldn't have done this kind of stuff without Lucid as a partner. On our own, we don't get into the business of search by ourselves. We don't get into the business of different types of usage, our stats package, for example. But when you look at the world or the ecosystem around Hadoop, there is us, Hortonworks, building the core technology, and then there's a bunch of stuff around it. So we did a quick poll here. This might be an eye chart in the back, but basically what this is for the managers in the room and for the people in the room who are saying, I'm not sure Hadoop matters yet. Do I care about Hadoop? The answer is, it's okay if you don't see the use case for it yet. It's going to come into your organization over the next 2 to 3 years or 1 to 3 years. And the reason it's going to take time is because it comes out of Google, it comes out of Yahoo, right? We're talking about 5,000 node clusters, 6,000 node clusters. That's why it's going to make its way into your organization. Because when you talk petabytes, there are very few solutions that can play at the petabyte scale and can be affordable. But most companies don't have petabytes. I remember saying even 2 years ago a very IBM type quote. Remember the quote from the 30s, there's room for only 4 computers in the whole world? I remember saying there's only 5 or 10 companies in the whole world with multi-petabyte stores that they actually actively mine and access. And I've learned since joining Hortonworks I was wrong. Right? There's a ton of petabyte volumes of data out there, and it surprised me. That said, people are on this stuff today doing 20 node clusters with a few gigabytes of data in it, and they're getting their feet wet. And that's where we're at as a community right now, is their big guys have adopted it, they've hardened it for the last 8 years, and it really works. So now guys who are trying to do tens of gigabytes, a terabyte, will find that it's actually pretty easy to do a terabyte. How many people have a traditional relational database with, say, more than 100 terabytes in it today? There's like 2 hands here. How many people have a Hadoop store with between 1 and 100 terabytes in it today? So that's interesting. There's more people with 1 to 100 terabytes in Hadoop than 100 terabytes in 35-year mature relational technology, right? Back to the hammer-nail thing. So you should start adopting it today if you're not thinking about Hadoop, if you're waiting for Oracle and IBM to catch up on Hadoop and fix their relational database. It's not really going to happen in the way it needs to. So if you follow this model, you'll basically end up in a path where you're doing a little bit with us today, doing a lot with Hadoop over time, because it's so much lower cost of ownership and because you'll be able to answer questions that you didn't even think of asking before. So let's step back for a second and say to ourselves, before we get into now, next, and beyond, what have we discussed so far, right? We have discussed what is Hadoop. It's a collection of Apache projects. We have discussed what value it brings at a very high level. I would say 100,000 feet level. The value is unlocking data for the business, giving you access to your data and answering questions you either were smart enough to know you shouldn't ask of your old systems, or you didn't even bother to ask because the common knowledge is that those types of questions cannot be answered by traditional storage. So we've talked about the value at that level. Now we're going to go into features and functions and what's in each version of Hadoop. The only thing we're sort of missing as a community, I mean, in this room today, is why is the community investing so heavily in Hadoop? And I think it's because we're going to go bottom up now and talk about features and functions and capabilities. And I'll summarize verbally, bringing it all together. What does this basically unlock for you? And how does it actually deliver the ability to play with your data in a sandbox that you didn't have before? So essentially, to understand why Yahoo invested so much in Hadoop, why Google invented the precursors to Hadoop in GFS and things like that, to understand why Hadoop is where it is today, you need to understand where it's headed. And the goalpost or the exit we're headed for on that road that I just showed you is we expect you guys to have half your company's data in Hadoop. So what we need to do as a vendor community, Lucid and Hortonworks and all the Hadoop vendors and anyone who plays in big data, we need to make Hadoop easy to use and consume. One of the biggest mistakes I can make as head of products for Hortonworks and sort of a steward of Hadoop itself in the open source community is to let Hadoop be skipped by the big established software vendors, right? So I think the guys who made the last generation of databases want nothing more than to skip Hadoop or to fold it in inside their label and not have your CIOs and your CEOs and COOs even hear the word Hadoop. They just hear the word Oracle or IBM or some established database. They want that brand recognition. They want that control of the account. And that will be a bad thing for you and for me. The way we avoid that is making sure that Hadoop is super easy to consume. That way it'll stay out in the open. It'll stay on the edge of innovation. It'll grow to subsume the data challenges you need it to. And that's what we're here to do, is be those stewards and those shepherds and make sure Hadoop stays open, stays easy. We also need to make it enterprise viable, and you'll see we've already started doing that in Hadoop 1. And we need to open up the system so that people like Grant can plug into it. Of course, Grant's a genius. He goes and builds Mahout in his spare time. But he also then goes and integrates LucidWorks to Hadoop Core, to HDFS, and all of that. Because we have a decent set of interfaces, we've got to make them better. And when we do all of this, what we do is we enable a new ecosystem, right? The Oracles and the IBMs of the world, those are good companies. Those are companies trying to solve problems. They're not as evil as some of us think they are. But at the end of the day, what makes them powerful is an ecosystem. I've got all the data in my system, and there are many things that people want to do with their data, so I have to enable a bunch of vendors to play with the data stored in my system. So at the end of the day, we have to do the same. Visualization tools have to run directly native against Hadoop, right? Analytics tools have to run directly native against Hadoop. Real-time tools, CEP. I'm sitting here scratching my head saying, why hasn't someone put CEP, be it Storm or, there's Apache projects to do CEP. Why aren't they plugging straight into Hadoop and saying, I can analyze a window of time in memory and fast, and then seamlessly spill that analysis down to a larger data set stored resident on disk. There's so much to this ecosystem, and there was the question earlier about how do I manage QA, dev, and prod clusters. I think the notion of jars and ears from the WebLogic days, from the 3-tier architecture days, being able to bundle all the artifacts and ship them around as essentially a tarball is a powerful concept. And how do I even piece together what are all the artifacts in a Hadoop system? So we'll figure all of that out for you, and here's our path so far. This thing doesn't always move when I click it, sorry. So Hortonworks data platform. Now, I've been in the software business for 20 years, and I've talked at easily 500 conferences. And everyone tunes out right about now, right? Okay, here comes his vendor pitch. Screw that, I don't want to hear it. Pardon my French. But Hadoop and Hortonworks should be synonyms in your head, right? They are synonyms in my head. I learned this after joining the company, strangely. Hortonworks gives everything we do away for free. We just wrote a management system for Hadoop. You will see a slide on it in a couple of slides. We just checked that into Apache.org this week, right? So this is not a vendor pitch. This is open source Hadoop. The difference between us and anything else out there is there are other people and other companies working with open source Hadoop and doing good work in our community. The difference between us and those is there is no bait and switch here. You're literally going to pay and this is the last thing I'll say about our company and our revenue model, but you pay us for training, you pay us if you want support contract kind of thing, if you want a subscription to the stuff we build, but you do not have to give us any money at all. So with that, you can turn your ears back on and say, okay, everything he's telling me, I can go get the bits and I don't have to pay him for it, and it's not a bait and switch. So we're GAing the Hortonworks data platform 1.0 this June. It's a fully packaged Hadoop distro. It's got a correct version of Pig tested and validated with a version of Hive. I can tell you what those versions are. I'm not going to bug you with them here. There's Pig, there's Hive, there's HBase, there's Mahout, there's Uzi and Scoop. And we've tried to think through what is the vast majority of community trying to get done with Hadoop, and how do we test it all to make sure it's all version compatible across all the components and projects. We've also thought through, what do we need to do that actually is better than off-the-shelf Apache.org Hadoop, and how do we move the needle forward? So it's fully open source. It's got management, monitoring, and provisioning in it. It's basically is the Apache core code line. So our head of release engineering actually manages Hadoop.org's source control, and he decides on behalf of the community, and he executes the branching commands, the tagging commands. So Hortonworks is basically not the only guys who decide what's in Hadoop, don't get me wrong, but we are the guys who, when people say, let's declare this 1.0, he actually puts the tag on source control. This is the version of everything that's 1.0. So it's very tightly aligned to Apache because we have very close control over Apache. It's got hcatalog, which you may not have heard of before. It was written by Hortonworks, added to the product, and you'll see why in a minute. It's got a capacity scheduler instead of a fair scheduler, which means it's actually going to look at how much room is on the cluster for more work and decide which nodes are getting jobs done fast and giving them the work next, as opposed to a fair scheduler, which just says 2 slots on a box. You can do 2 jobs, and if you finish those jobs, you wait until I give you more work. And it's got enterprise data integration. So Ambari is management monitoring. Without going into the history of Ambari, I'll just state that Ambari is something like 10 months in the making. It was created as an incubating project, and then swirl set in. All the different vendors who want control over the Hadoop community started saying, how do I put my stamp on monitoring, management, and control? What we've done is basically said, we're going to come back into the Ambari project and give the right underpinnings for pluggable monitoring and management so that all parties can play in the Hadoop world. But on top of just pluggability, we're actually going to give you full screens, full workflows, full UIs, so that if you don't have any solutions for us to plug into, then we're a full one-stop shop for management and monitoring. And this is, when you go to Apache, you don't get Ambari. It is a project at Apache. So you would have to take Hadoop plus Ambari and then make sure they're compatible and integrate them together and install them. Or you could do what we want you to do, which is basically just go download Ambari. What happens is, or Hortonworks data platform actually starts out as just an Ambari download. Then Ambari will stick a Yum server on your server and grab the rest of Hadoop as RPMs. And then it'll ask you, what's shown across the top here in fuzzy screen captures is a workflow. That's an installation workflow. Answer me 7 screens worth of questions and give me a text file listing all the server IPs you want Hadoop running on, and I will put it all on those boxes for you. So setting cloud aside, this is basically on-premise Hadoop, right? It'll actually, you want a 20-node cluster, you want a 50-node cluster, just give me the list of boxes and I'll blast it out there for you. I'll put the software down, all the compatible bits, and then once it's all installed, I have monitoring and alerting dashboards. So I'll show you how much disk is being used, how much CPU is being used, how many map reduces are running in the cluster on a particular node. If a node crashes, you'll get an alert, and you can set up whether that alert goes to your pager or just to an email alias and all that good stuff. And it's all free. It's all open. We're not charging for it, right? And not only are we not charging for it, we are making it, designing it in a fashion that you can be completely dependent on it, or you can plug it into your own stuff. So what's inside Ambari is Nagios, Ganglia, and Puppet, right? So the first thing people want to do is, can I just have your Nagios alerts go into my Nagios server? We're working on that. Can I just have your Ganglia performance metrics go into my central Ganglia infrastructure? We're working on that. Can I orchestrate my Hadoop cluster with my Puppet master instead of your internal Puppet master? We are working on that, right? But because we're open source, because we're doing this right, we're basically saying we are not trying to monetize these tools. You are so used to open source companies saying monitoring and management is paid and the core is free. And we're not doing that. So we are building it in a very community-friendly fashion. We're depending on services and other technologies from other vendors and other open source projects because that's the right thing to do. It makes it cheaper for us to maintain. It makes it more usable for you faster. So that's monitoring and management in 1.0. So the next thing is enterprise data integration. How many people have heard of Talend? So about 20% of the room. How many people have heard of Informatica? Most of the room. So Talend is ETL tools. It's a lower market point than Informatica. And what it does is gives you drag and drop ability to do joins in memory. So if I have a normalized schema over here and I want to put it all into one table so that I could do some analytics on it, I can do that in a very drag and drop fashion. Log it, give it credentials to a server. It discovers the schema using the data dictionary on whatever database you plug it to. It's got like 50 different drivers for different databases. It'll discover your schemas. It'll let you map tables together and then create workflows where you output new tables into new schemas on new database instances. Imagine doing that with Hadoop, right? So what is Pig? What is Hive? What is HBase? What is MapReduce? I can figure all of that out, or I could do drag and drop with Hadoop. So let me take my employee table. Let me take my customer master. Let me take my inventory tables, join it all together, export to HDFS, and then inside HDFS run 2 or 3 Pig scripts, and then with the resulting output file, dump it back into a database for applications to actually query and work with in real time. So enterprise data integration to us means this. We worked with Talend. We got them to basically provide an open source version of this. This is Apache licensed stuff. It comes with HDP 1.0. The next thing is HCatalog. I promised you I would talk about that. It's a data dictionary for Hadoop. So I can upload files into HDFS. That's great. Those are now files in the directories owned by users. What I'd much rather be able to do is attribute or attach metadata to those files. This file shall be called table employee, and it will have the following 4 columns. And its partition scheme is as follows. So I can literally define how HCatalog is stored in HCatalog, how my data is stored in HDFS to be discovered by runtime tools, visualization tools, analytics tools, databases, humans writing SQL queries. So I can now actually attach to a Hive system. And Hive had this embedded inside Hive. We've basically factored it out. So I can take any file, any resource in Hadoop, and attach metadata to it. With that, I'm basically up-leveling Hadoop to the first underpinnings of being enterprise class, right? I've got monitoring and management on enterprise scale. I've got visualization, I've got drag and drop ETL, ELT, and I've got metadata and data dictionaries so that tooling can start to plug into it. Also got to put it on all the platforms people want it to run on. So Microsoft is working with Hortonworks, and you will see Hadoop run on a Windows cluster this year. It's already running now, actually. Microsoft has done some other cool stuff that they're giving to us as a community, which is Excel plugging straight to a Hadoop cluster, being able to run MapReduce jobs and view the output as Excel tables and spreadsheets and change cells and have it go update the raw data in HDFS and all that kind of stuff. They're also donating a JavaScript framework to allow you to pull Hadoop-based data from MapReduce output as well as HDFS straight into a browser for jQuery or EXTJS to display and let people play with. So what's in 2.0? The headline here is basically Hadoop.Now is we're making it enterprise grade. Hadoop Next is Hadoop 2, and then more enterprise grade work there. So Hadoop 2 is where the whole community thinks all the HA work is going on. HA stands for high availability. What we mean by that is making sure that Hadoop never goes down, right? Hadoop 1 has been explained to the world as capable of going down for a minute or an hour at a time and needing manual recovery to come back up. Hadoop 2 is supposed to fix that. We're in the middle of it. If you believe that Hadoop 2 has HA, then you've been misled or you misunderstood. So what we've done so far is we've designed HA as a community, us and our partners and even competitors. We've designed HA out in open source, Hortonworks saying, here is the design. A couple of vendors have implemented it, and those implementations are being put through their paces now. I would say we're end of this year before HA on the 2.0 line is thought through, which of course means back to the thread of enterprise viable, we've got to do HA on the 1.0 line for the community's benefit, right? So there's a lot of work being done in 2.0. We're going to simplify it and give you HA on the 1.0 line in shorter time. The next interesting thing in 2.0, what's coming next in Hadoop, is Yarn. Yarn is the next generation of MapReduce. MapReduce is all about tasks, job tracker, task tracker, and slots, right? A slot is basically a forked and exact VM, and it can run a map or a reduce job or any command you want it to. What we realized is the guys at Yahoo can use a Hadoop cluster to run any workload they want. They could get Cassandra running inside a Hadoop cluster if they wanted to. So Yarn is the re-swizzle of the interfaces and APIs in MapReduce so that it becomes clear to everyone that a Hadoop cluster can run any workload, right? So the first thing we'll do is we'll put Yarn in place this year, so in beta, so that you can run an H-based cluster and a MapReduce cluster side by side. MapReduce and H-base are very different workloads. One is analytics, one is key value. Right? So I'd like to be able to say in my 1,000 node cluster, these 250 nodes do key value storage and the other 750 do analytics. And maybe steal 50 nodes from the analytics cluster for the key value store as it starts to grow. And if you drop that down to 100 node clusters, it still makes sense, 15 and 75. So this is the ability to partition up clusters, define workloads in a very approachable fashion. That's coming in 2.0. The data platform 2 will then have some tweaks to HDFS Federation. If you haven't heard about it, we contributed into the 2.0 line. Federation basically means I can have more than one name node. So namespaces is how I call it as a products guy. Basically, there's a name node for this team, a name node for that team, or if you prefer, a name node for this cluster and a name node for that cluster. Name node of high availability. It's in 2.0. We're bringing it down into 1.0, but it's not a backport of the 2.0 implementation. That one's not ready. It's actually partnering with Red Hat, VMware, and a couple of open source vendors to build HA in the 1.0 line using either free or paid solutions. So now Hadoop Beyond. This is where I basically want to help you guys understand. I have data warehouses, analytics tools, relational databases, and Hadoop. How does it all fit together? What are the overlaps? What are the seams that I need to stitch together, etc.? The way I think about it is what is your life cycle of adoption? So you start with a very traditional business, OLTP on the top, OLAP on the bottom, if you will, just to be succinct because I'm running out of time. And you do ETL between them. You guys heard of Informatica, Talend. You basically push data on a batch basis between those two silos. And then on the side of the business, you've got this big data system coming in, which is your web logs and your Twitter streams and your social media and your sensor outputs from RFID, all of that going into a big data system because you don't, hopefully Hadoop, but you don't really want to put all of that data in your traditional stores like I tried to in my past life. And so Hadoop Beyond is basically making Hadoop the core refinery that is the cold storage for all data. The whole enterprise record is in Hadoop. Why? Because it's commodity based. I'm paying pennies per gigabyte, right? So I'm going to put all the data from OLTP, from OLAP, and they're going to pull on demand from a Hadoop core. The other thing they've got to be able to do is ask Hadoop to morph the data into a pleasing format for that particular need, for that particular siloed use case, right? So the notion of Hadoop as a data refinery is something that I think is very powerful, and that, that's where we're going to take Hadoop, is you basically hand it all your workload, all your data, and then you'll say, this guy needs the data in CSV format. That guy needs the data, but he needs a sample every 10th line. This guy needs the data, but he needs it joined with image data. And he wants to see only the records where an image file exists that is bigger than 1024 by 768 or things like that. So being able to join data, union it in some way, being able to turn non-structured data into structured data on the fly, that will mean that when you look at that Venn diagram of how Hadoop fits into your ecosystem, it's basically the hub or the center. And that's why it's called a data platform. So this sort of builds out the whole picture. And if you're wondering what are the pieces and parts and how far are we off from this vision, the big data refinery is the Hadoop you know and love today. It's basically up-leveling MapReduces into being able to run arbitrary jobs on a regular schedule in a Hadoop cluster. Hive and Pig, and we'll start putting R into the kit, and Mahout is all about business intelligence, analytics, machine learning, and HBase is the part of Hadoop that can participate in real-time runtime transactional systems. That's basically it. So a quick shameless plug for Hadoop Summit. Similar type of construct to this conference. It's going to be very technical. There are tons of sponsors. I think there's like 40 sponsors, so you will see the big guys talk about what Hadoop means to them as vendors and try to get money out of you. You will see the open source guys talk about where Hadoop is going next, and Jeffrey Moore is keynoting. It's filling up fast, so I would probably, before you fly out of Boston, I would consider logging in quickly and reserving your seat at hadoopsummit.org. That's it.